Hey everyone, in this video, let's take a look at question 739, daily temperatures on Leetcode. This is part of our blind 75 list of questions, so let's begin. In this question, we are given an array of integers called temperatures, which represents the daily temperatures. We want to return an array answer such that answer of I is the number of days you have to wait after the ith day to get a warmer temperature. If there are no such future days in which this is possible, we will keep answer at I as 0. Okay, so let's take a look at what this question is saying. These examples here. We have these examples here. So what is this question saying? So first of all, I will actually just order the days, right? So I will say something like this is day 1, day 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, right? So these are our set of days. And so for 73, what is the next day that is warmer, right? Well, it would be this one, right? It would be 74. 74 is the next warmer day. And we can see that that's day 2 and we're day 1. So we all add in 1 to our answer. What about for 74? Well, again, it's like the next day, right? So it is 3 minus 2, which is 1. Now for 75, the next warmer day is actually this one, the day 76, right? Or the day that has temperature of 76, which is day 7. So we have 7 minus 3, which basically means that we have to wait 4 days. And you can basically go on. And then eventually, like you see, for 76, we actually don't have a warmer day. And same thing for temperature 73 at the last index here, we don't have a warmer day. And you can similarly follow the logic over here. You can see that our answer should be 1, 1, 1, and 0. And then similarly over here. Okay, so what does this question kind of remind me of? Well, if you think about what this question is saying, we want to basically find like the next warmer temperature, right? And if you think of this in terms of a more generic problem, temperature, in order for it to be warmer, it has to be greater, right? It has to be like, we can say that temperature 6 is greater than 4, for example. So essentially what I'm being asked to do here is I'm being asked to find the next greater element, right? That's all this question is. I'm essentially just finding the next greater element. So for next greater element, for 73, it would be 74. 74, it's 75. For 75, it is 76, etc., right? I'm just being asked to find this, but instead of returning this, I'm returning like the difference here, like how many days, right? How many days this happened in. So we've actually already done a problem like this. We've already done the problem next greater temperature, or whatever it was called. What did I call it? I forgot what I called it, but it was next greater temperature, something like that, right? So we've already done a question, next greater element. That was the question. Next greater element 1. So it's exactly the same as that. Next greater element 1. Exactly the same as this question, but instead of returning this temperature here, we're actually just returning the difference here. And if you remember how we did this question, we used a monotonic stack, specifically a decreasing monotonic stack. Why? Because whenever you want to find the next greater, then you have to use a decreasing monotonic stack. If you want to find the next lower, then you have to use an increasing monotonic stack. So I'm not going to go through the entire monotonic stack logic again, but if you want to learn that, you can go to the next greater element, but I'll try to basically just summarize it as we're doing this problem here. But really, it's all the same. It's exactly the same. So why don't we go ahead and start off with the monotonic stack idea, and maybe we can start off by finding the next greater element, and then we can maybe modify our algorithm so that instead of our next greater element, we will return like the difference here, right? So maybe let's go ahead and we'll start off with the next greater element, and then we can modify it to return the difference. Okay. So I will just call this temps, right? Temperatures. It's a little long. So how might we go about doing this? Well, first thing we need to do, right, is we want to restore a result variable, and our result variable, we can just start it off as like an empty list, right? We don't need to do anything right now. Now, what do we want? Well, we need to go through our temps array, right? So for I in range, 0 to length of temps, and we also need our stack here. So we will have our stack. This is our decreasing monotonic stack. So now what? Well, now we need to determine if I can pop elements off the stack, right? So that's the first thing we do. Either determine if we can pop, and then here, add to stack. Okay, so if we can pop, how can we determine if we can pop or not? Well, in order for us to pop from a decreasing monotonic stack, we must break the structure, right? We must have something where it's like 5 and 1, and then we try to add on something like a 3, which in this case is like breaking it because it would break the monoticity. So in this case, we can check while stack and stack at -1 is less than the number we're just about to add, which is temps at I. If this is the case, then I can go ahead and pop from the stack. So I can do item is equal to stack.pop. So in this case, what we would be doing is we would be popping this 1 here. And then what does it tell me? It tells me once next greater element is 3. In this case, the day or the temperature that is the next greater one from the current temperature is 3. It's 3 degrees. So that's what it would tell me. We go ahead and do that, and then, well, we would need to like store this information somewhere, right? So here we can figure out like store this information. So we would store this somewhere, and otherwise we would just add to the stack, right? So here we would do stack.append temp set I. And so what we can actually just do here is we can actually just add this to our res. So we can do res.append. Well, what do we want to append? Well, we want to append like the answer. Now, if you think about this one, we will not necessarily be processing like this array, like and like adding to result in the same order, right? Because here what we're doing is I figured out the answer for 1, but I don't know the answer for 5 yet. So it wouldn't make sense for me to just add to the result array just yet. So maybe instead of actually adding the element, why don't we add the index? Because if we add the index, then what we could do is we could maybe set result. We start it off at all zeros, right? Length of temps, start it off at all zeros. And then instead of adding temp set I, we can just add an I, which means this, instead of stack at -1, it would be stack at -1. So this will actually give me the index, right? And then I will figure out temps at this index. And then this item that I'm popping, it's actually not an item, it's more of an index. And then what I could do is I could do result at index is equal to, well, this item that I just popped, which is, or the item that I'm just about to add. So this will be temp set I. So let's take a look at what this does. And I will just print temp set I, or not temp set I, I'll print, I'll print temp set result, I'll print result in the very end. And then I can just return like an empty list like this. So let's take a look at what happens here. So maybe I shouldn't have run all the test cases. I'll just run the first one. But let me just run this first test case here. Okay, so you can see that we're actually getting the proper answer. The next greater element is 73 is 74, then a 74 is 75, then here it's 76, which is all the way here, etc. Now we're almost there, we're almost at the solution. But notice that we don't want to add in the next greater element, right? We want to add in the amount of days that it's been since this next greater element, right? And if you notice, because we have access to the index, we can actually very easily do this. Why? Well, if we have access to the index, then we know the index, like this index that we just popped, right? So we know the index that we just popped, and we know the current index also. So all we need to do now is we just need to store their difference. So instead of temp set I here, what I can do is I have this index here, and I know this index, it must be somewhere in the future, right? It must be one of the future days. What I can do is I can do index minus I, and that should be my answer. And I might actually have to do +1 here, depending on how they do their question. But let me just see. So I'll actually just run this example test case. Okay, so we get -1, -1, -4, -2. So we get the correct answer, but it looks like the order is different. And I made a mistake. I said that this is in the future. It's not. This is actually in the past, because this is what was just on the stack. So the future is actually this here, I. There should be I minus index, right? And then looks like that's actually will fill up the result array. So we can actually just return result. We'll go ahead and remove this. So now let's go ahead and run the test case, and we can see that it passes. We'll run all of the test cases to see that they pass. And then we can go ahead and submit. And perfect, we arrive at the answer. So this is the O of n time answer and O of n space answer as well. So let's go through quickly what we did here that was different than the next greater element. Well, we had a couple of differences, right? First of all, we added the index instead of the item, right? So we added in the index. Why did we add in the index? Well, often it's actually easier to just add in the index, because from the index, you can figure out the element. You can also do like interesting things like figure out the difference like in daily temperatures, just as we did here. That was like one difference we did. Otherwise, like when you add the index, we refilled the res array, right? So when you add the index, another advantage is that you don't have to process items in like the order they came from. In next greater element, like we had a specific order that we wanted to follow. So that's why like we were able to just go ahead and like we did it using just the item itself. But if you don't have to do that, if you have access to the index, then you can fit out as they come about. Like if we have something like this, if we have if we have like this 1 here, then I can like fill out this in the answer array whenever I get the index of this one, right? So that's another way in which we can just use the index. So in the future, it's probably just easier to use the index instead of like the actual item itself, but that's just something to keep in mind. Anyways, I hope this question was useful and it helped.